97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher.
I think our track record in the last 20 years, how many NFC East titles, playoff appearances, and appearances in the NFC Championship game, those are some of the metrics I look at, and I'll compare our record with almost anybody.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
That's right, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. The newest episode dropped this morning. And joining us right now on the Boardwalk Kinda Hotline, as he does every Monday here on the Sports Bash. Of course, Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill along with Hunter Brody here on 97.3 ESPN. The one and only Geoff Mosher joins us. Geoff, how you doing this Monday?
I'm doing great, fellas. Hope you guys are well. I think I've been listening to the show, and man, did Hunter bring up a great kind of pros and cons type scenario? Or maybe there was you, Josh, who said that a Kardashian has ruined every man that
was
he's
me.
ever been with. But
that was definitely me.
Yeah, oh, that was you. You got to ask, though, was it worth it, though? I mean, they are the Kardashians, and they look good. So you do wonder, like, is it worth giving your life away
No.
and potentially going crazy
No.
for a few years with a Kardashian?
Yes.
No, because they're not the only beautiful women in the world. They are not the only women who are worth dating in the world. There are plenty of beautiful, wonderful women who will not destroy your life.
You tell him, Josh.
Yeah, but you're open. Oh, first of all, that narrows the question down to the obvious. Like, none of us are ever going to date or marry a Kardashian. I mean, some of us, like myself, are already married. But the point is just to look at it through the prism of you have an opportunity to be with a Kardashian. It doesn't mean that if you say no, Josh, that you get to go be with, Selma Hayek afterward or anything like that. It's simply a question of you have an opportunity to have a relationship with a Kardashian, a once-in-a-lifetime deal there. Do you take it and reap the benefits knowing that the end result will be bad for you, but on the way to that being bad, you may have some tremendous peaks, if you will.
This is
no pun intended.
Yeah, this is exactly what happens when the Eagles don't pull the trigger on Carson Wentz. We are now starting Football at 4 with if we will or should date a Kardashian.
I love it. It's true.
So speaking of Carson Wentz, Geoff, he has not been traded as of this moment. I thought an interesting point. I want to bring it up to you. Jeff Darlington was on ESPN Radio this morning and said that he believes that the deadline for the Eagles is March 19th. I find that interesting because Adam Kaplan said that also on Friday that the Eagles have until a certain point where that roster bonus kicks in. So is it fair to say that the Eagles are going to take their time as things look right now to get the right deal?
I think technically, Josh, they have that deadline because it's correct to say that a certain amount of money kicks in for the Eagles that would be guaranteed for them that wouldn't be if they were able to make a trade, and the other team would have to take care of that. However, I don't think that means we should assume that Howie Roseman is fine waiting until that deadline to do it, because you're talking about March 19th, you're talking about free agency, I guess, being underway already at that point by a few days or maybe going to be a few days afterward. And Carson Wentz is one of several players on the roster, guys, that their futures have to be kind of reconciled here. And there's a lot of moves that the Eagles need to make to become cap compliant, just to become cap compliant. I mean, we've talked about this. This is going to be a crossroads offseason. There's a lot of different players who will either have to have contracts extended to lower their cap numbers or will have to be sent away in a trade, like potentially Zach Ertz, maybe some other guys. There'll have to be some guys who are cut for cap casualty reasons. So I don't think that he can have this hanging over them for the next month and a half. I honestly think that there is an impetus for Howie Roseman to have to do this sooner than later so that he can get on with the rest of the roster architecture that he's going to have to deal with.
How do you think the league right now values Carson Wentz? Could we open up the show kind of talking about what else is out there? What other moves can these organizations make if they want to go after a different quarterback not named Carson Wentz? Where do you think he stands compared to some of the other guys available right now?
Well, I think there's no question, Hunter, that there is a certain question mark about what Carson Wentz is going to be going forward coming off of a bad year. I don't think that he's quote-unquote damaged goods. I don't think, though, that you're going to get the same kind of Matthew Stafford haul, because even if you compare their numbers and they're somewhat similar throughout their career, the bottom line is Matthew Stafford was not benched, and it wasn't just this last year, and I don't think he's had a year as bad as Carson Wentz just had. So there is a little bit of buyer beware out there with, are we going to be able to get Carson Wentz back to being what he was anytime between 2017 and 2019, somewhere in there. And I think some teams, I think the Colts feel that they have the infrastructure to be able to do that. Obviously, they have Frank Reich there. Obviously, they have Press Taylor there. They have a great offensive line. They have a really good general manager. They have ample cap space to the point where they could bring in Carson Wentz and still make moves to put weaponry around him. And so I'm sure in their offices, they're feeling pretty confident about what they could do to rebuild Carson Wentz if they're able to get their hands on him. But just like every other team, they can't be positive of that. So this is why we're at where we are, because there's certainly, I guess this is the risk-reward deal. There's high risk, there's high reward.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Geoff, when you think about the high risk, high reward, but where does that high risk, high reward compare to other quarterbacks who are available? You have guys out there like Matt Ryan. There's speculation Jimmy Garoppolo is getting traded. Speculation Sam Darnold will get traded. Mitch Trubisky is a free agent. So where does Wentz's high risk, high reward compare to those guys?
Well, just from just speaking to people around the league over the last few years about where Carson, how they viewed Carson compared to other quarterbacks. Certainly, I think he compared favorably to some of those names you mentioned because of the physical tools that he had. Everybody saw in 2018 what he was been able to do. I think that it's fair to say that he is not the same athlete that he was back then because of the injuries that he's had. And so that's why we're talking about him right now and a deal yet to be consummated and the risk that's involved. I do believe, though, that people still look at him as a player with the right tools around him, is an accurate quarterback, likes to drive the ball, can make any type of throw in the NFL, and can lead a team. I still think that he's viewed that way. And, you look at some of the other guys that you mentioned that are out there. Sam Darnold was out there, hasn't really lived up to being a top 5 pick, I think what he was. No playoffs. And obviously there's been not a team built around him that's really good. But I think there's some question marks on what his ceiling is compared to what Carson Wentz's ceiling could be. Marcus Mariota was a starter for a while and did not, really do anything. I think he went to the playoffs once, but he didn't really establish himself as an elite quarterback. He did look good in his short amount of time there, backing up Derek Carr when he had to play. And so there'll probably be some interest in him. Same thing with Garoppolo, a guy who was in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, but obviously very injured last year. A guy who, when he plays well, you can see a lot of talent, but you don't see it consistently, game in, game out, and of course the injuries last year really hurt him. So I don't want to say it's all just a mixed bag because each quarterback has his own strengths and weaknesses here, but I sense that people don't forget that what Carson Wentz was able to do in 2017 and then the way he worked himself back to be ready in 2018. I know there's a lot of debate about Carson Wentz's win-loss record in 2018 and 2019, but his statistics were pretty good. I mean, I think he had passer ratings over 90 in each of those years. And if you even go back to last year, 4,000 yards without a receiver who went 1,000 yards. I mean, he did some things, especially in December there, that make you realize what he can be when he's consistently playing well.
We brought up Zach Ertz in a trade package before. Reports over the weekend mentioned maybe Andre Dillard in a similar package type deal. Have you heard anything about that? And if not, what is your thoughts on that possibility?
So I haven't heard that. Doesn't mean it hasn't been discussed, but I personally haven't heard it. My personal thoughts on that is that I think that they should keep Andre Dillard. I mean, unless he becomes a sweetener for a deal they can't turn up. I mean, the report was, Zach Ertz and Dillard for something?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to know what that something is, right, in order to really be able to comment on it.
And it even speculated maybe even all three of them, like Wentz, Ertz, and Andre Dillard in the same deal.
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about getting high for first-round or second-round picks back, maybe I understand that. But to me, I think depth on the offensive line is something that's critical for this team. And although I would say going into OTAs, I think Jordan Mailata should be left tackle for Jordan Mailata to lose. There's no reason why you wouldn't want to have Andre Dillard with all that talent that he does have, at least as your top backup. Maybe you can cross-train him at right tackle, especially if he's not going to be a starter. He has the time then to be cross-trained. I just don't think that you should give up on him just as a throw-in, because for all that we saw his weaknesses, like he needed to get stronger, he needed to get tougher. I know there was question marks about that even going into last year before his injury. It's hard to find a guy with that size and that kind of dancing bear footwork that he had. His pass protection skills, his footwork, especially with speed rushers, not necessarily power rushers, but speed edge rushers, is just not something that you see in guys every day. That's why he was a first-round pick. And I would just like to see Jeff Stoutland have the opportunity to work with him a little bit more, with him being healthy. And it's a bonus that you have Mailata there to be able to play left tackle and Lane Johnson at right tackle. But as we've seen, injuries have really hit this team hard over the last few years. I just think that there's an opportunity there to have a really good backup for depth if he can't crack the starting lineup. So I just wouldn't trade him away for a bag of footballs or anything like that, or a throw-in.
Geoff Mosher joining us here at Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. You can follow Geoff on Twitter at Geoff Mosher NFL. Check out the latest edition of the Inside the Birds podcast that dropped this morning. Mosher and Kaplan on there, getting more into the Eagles coaching staff and more. Geoff, talking about specifically the trade situations, if we could get over to Zach Ertz, there's a speculation out there that Ertz, as Bros mentioned, could be traded with Dillard, could be traded separately, could be packaged with Wentz. What makes Ertz a tradable piece aside from the fact of who he is?
Well, I think what makes him a tradable piece is that, how many really good tight ends who are capable of getting you 800 or more yards and 50 or more receptions are out there. I mean, there's obviously the top 4 or 5, which is Kelsey, which is Darren Waller, which is George Kittle when healthy. Who else am I missing there? I'm sure there's someone who's on that list Mark Andrews from the Ravens. But after the top 5, I mean, there's a pretty big drop-off. Now, if the evaluation on Zach Ertz is that he's not what he was, but he can still get you 40 to 50 catches, 600 to 800 yards, his contract's pretty favorable right now. It's one of the reasons why he's able to be traded. And there are teams that you're seeing more and more are relying on those 2 tight end formations, whether it's the 49ers, whether it's the Ravens, a couple other teams. I think the Patriots, obviously we know that. And all those, I think the Dolphins would probably be into that more with Brian Flores there. There's just teams that like to use 2 tight ends, and one might be a blocker and one might be a pass catcher. I mean, you saw what Trey Burton got from the Bears a couple of years ago as a free agent, and Trey Burton has never had a season anywhere near, to my knowledge, anything that Zach Ertz ever had. Now, maybe that was a mistake by the Bears, but the point is people are always looking to add talent, and I think that Ertz is the type of player that a good established team, not a rebuilding team, like a veteran team that really likes to use the tight ends, could bring in at a pretty decent number there and help fortify the offense as it tries to win a Super Bowl.
When looking at his production last year, do you think that was more because of the physical injury? How much do you think played into the contract situation, knowing that this is coming down to an end, knowing just the dysfunction involved as well? Would you say that maybe that had more to do with it than just the physical side of things?
Yeah, that's a great question, Hunter, because sometimes we've seen that where a guy in a bad mindset or a bad situation mentally where he's at, his environment impacts the play. Because when I watched tape of Ertz last year, I remember thinking he looked a little bit slower, he looked less dynamic, something wasn't right there. I mean, there were times he was open and Carson Wentz didn't see him as much, so that was on Carson too. But there were also just times where he looked like he was not the polished route runner and the guy who just knows how to get open in every situation that he used to be. But that was early, and then he got hurt, so that marred a lot of his season last year too. There's what talent evaluators and scouts and people who watch tape would have to decide is, did they see something that is so alarming that they feel he's not even anywhere near what he used to be, or are they able to kind of understand the environment, the circumstance, the unhappiness, and be able to kind of project that and say, we think in our culture with maybe either a new deal or something done, a better situation around him, that he will look a little bit more dynamic than he was the year before when he just was clearly going through some things, because he's not that old, and tight ends can play in this league for quite a while. We've seen Antonio Gates and Tony Gonzalez and several other guys, Heath Miller. I mean, guys play for a while at that position. There's really no reason why Zach can't still be a really effective tight end. He may not be a 70 catch, 1,000-yard guy anymore, but he should still be a pretty good tight end.
Geoff Mosher joining us, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Of course, every Monday and Wednesday, Geoff joins the show here on 97.3 ESPN. Adam Kaplan on Fridays. Andrew Duchecka will be in here tomorrow with Mike Yell back in tomorrow here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig filling in on the Sports Bash. Geoff, one of the things also this offseason we got to figure out for the Eagles, because with the new coaching staff, you and Adam talked about this on the podcast, how does everything fit in with the new offense and defense? So if we're going to assume that Zach Ertz is gone, if we're going to assume Carson Wentz is gone, what does the offense look like going into 2021 without those guys in it?
Well, I think, and something Adam and I addressed, is that this has to be the year that you see development and elevated play out of wide receivers. There's no question about it. And I even went as far to say it becomes a referendum on the entire organization, from their talent acquisition to their coaching to their development overall, if wide receivers do not take a step up. First of all, you look at Nick Sirianni, the new coach. He was a wide receiver, right? So, I mean, that's his pedigree. That's his position. Kevin Patullo, that he brought in as his pass game specialist, was a quarterback to start off his high school and college career and then moved to wide receiver. So he's played wide receiver in college. And Aaron Moorhead, retained from the prior staff, played wide receiver for the Colts for a couple of years in the NFL. That's 3 guys on the offensive staff who have played the position. And I said, that reminds me of when Carson Wentz got drafted, and he had 3 guys. He had Frank Reich, he had John DeFilippo, and he had, of course, Doug Peterson, like that quarterback cocoon that we all talked about. So if this coaching staff can't make these wide receivers play better, more consistently, you can't have a 4-game stretch like Travis Fulgham have and then completely disappear. If they can't get these guys tap into the speed that John Hightower has and Quez Watkins, and certainly maybe they might draft a wide receiver or 2 as well. If they can't develop this wide receiver position, then maybe these aren't the right coaches, and certainly you'll have to continue to come down on Howie Roseman for being the one who brings these wide receivers in, and question everything about it, because the environment should be one in which wide receivers here flourish. And if you listen to Nick Sirianni, his philosophy, what he's said in videos before, is to try to get the ball in the hands of his most dynamic playmakers within 5 to 10 yards. He likes to get these guys over the middle, in space, so that they can make yards after the catch, and he likes to design schemes that enable him to do that. So if we're talking at the end of the year about the wide receivers being a failure, then it's a failure on both the coaching staff and the people who are responsible for acquiring wide receiver talent.
Something Adam brought up to us on Friday was the lack of assistant positional coaches. How do you view that?
I don't think that's in some cases, I think it's a big deal. Like, take the secondary. There's a lot of, you're going to go into camp and you're going to have like 6 cornerbacks and 7 safeties. Of course, they're not all going to make it, but that's how many you have before you whittle it down. Right now, you have 1 defensive backs coach, and that's Denard Wilson, right? Denard Wilson from the Jets, who came over to be the defensive backs coach here. Jay Valai was supposed to be the assistant, and I assume one was going to, handle safeties, the other would handle corners. And now that Jay Valai has left for his 4th job in about 3 months, they have yet to say that there's going to be an assistant at that position. Well, that's a lot of pressure on Denard Wilson to have 13 or 14 defensive backs in training camp and have to be coaching them all. In other positions where there's not as many guys, tight end, running back. I don't think it's as essential.
Geoff, before we let you go, I got to ask you the question that we kind of started with, and we got to end with it. So the reason why the Kardashian thing came up was because Paul Hudrick was wearing a Jurassic Park shirt earlier today. I complimented him on it. It was revealed that Broads has never seen any of the Jurassic movies at all. So I ask you, whose side are you on? Are you on with me and Paul that, Jurassic Park, Jurassic World, or with Broads who says, Keeping Up with the Kardashians, Love Island, etc.?
Yeah, sometimes I want to give Broads a free pass because I have to be reminded that a lot of things that were awesome in my life happened at a time where Broads was like either in the womb or still in diapers. So I can't maybe expect him to like have had the same experience that I had. But then I step back and think, you know what? I wasn't alive when the Godfather trilogy came out, and I still seen it. I wasn't alive when certain movies in the 70s that were, or even 60s were really popular. Any of those Christmas movies that everybody watched, but I've seen them. So I can't excuse Broads for not at least seeing Jurassic Park and understanding how significant that movie was when it came out, to what special effects were, and changing the kind of the cinema. I don't want to say changing the game. Obviously, Star Wars helped do that, but it just took it to another level. They created living, walking, breathing dinosaurs, and nobody had ever seen that on screen before.
Yeah, but Moshe, you're forgetting. You are totally just disregarding Snooki being hammered at the bar and JWoww having to go pick her up, bring her back to the smush room to make sure she was safe. There's so much you're missing out on from Jersey Shore perspective that I don't think you're doing it, you're not doing it right.
That's poison, man. That stuff is brain poison.
Exactly. Thank you, Geoff.
That's your problem. You've been poisoned by that stuff. Just straight trash, man. Trash. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Straight trash, homie.
I only saw the first two seasons.
He speaks from knowledge then. He knows intimately how much trash it is. There you go.
I used to actually have a beach house in Belmar, which was, back in my 20s, and which was not Belmar, South Jersey, Belmar, which is right next to Seaside Heights. So I know all about those places that they were hanging out, unfortunately.
Yeah, just so you know, Geoff, Broads asked me what I was watching late at night, and I explained to him my lineup, and his next question was, how much wine did I have? And that's where that conversation went. So.
Yeah, I mean, nobody really should be comparing their habits to you, Josh. No offense. I mean, you're a one-of-a-kind type of person, too.
I take that as a compliment. How about that?
Sure.
Geoff, I appreciate the time and entertaining us as well.
No problem, guys. Have a good one.